I remember the first time I ever built a website. It was this chaotic, beautiful mess of pixelated GIFs, a Starry Night background that didn't quite tile right, and a MIDI version of a song I am definitely not proud of that would blast out the second you landed on the page. It was my own little corner of the internet, hosted on a site called GeoCities. It was objectively terrible, and it was absolutely brilliant. But where did it all go? Millions of us built our first digital homes on sites like these, places like Yahoo Games, old-school message boards, and personal homepages. And today, they're just ghosts. The links are broken, the domains are dead. We're living in the internet's digital graveyard, and the tombstones are all the same. 404 not found. This isn't just about a few outdated websites. This is about the mass deletion of our collective digital history. An entire era of culture, creativity, and weird human connection wiped clean. So today, we're going on an archaeological dig. We're sifting through the digital ruins to figure out how and why our online childhoods were wiped from the internet forever. Before the internet was just a handful of giant walled-off apps, it was a sprawling, messy digital frontier. It was the Wild West, and we were all pioneers carving out our own little homesteads. The web of the 90s and early 2000s didn't feel like a utility. It felt like a place you went to, a world of passionate fans building shrines to their favorite bands, of communities popping up around the most niche hobbies, of personal expression that was often clunky, garish, and deeply, authentically human. Just think about the aesthetic. The flashing under-construction GIFs, the little visitor counters at the bottom of the page, the web rings that would send you hopping from one fan site to another. It was a universe away from the sleek, minimalist, and let's be honest, nearly identical design that dominates the web today. The modern web is corporatized and clean. The old web was personalized and chaotic. Back then, the line between a brand's website and a user's page wasn't just blurred. The user's page was usually way more interesting. This was the original user-generated content, long before UGC was a marketing buzzword. It was a digital public square, long before it started to feel more like a digital shopping mall. But that world is gone, and its disappearance wasn't an accident. It was a demolition. To understand what we lost, we have to start with the biggest tombstone in the graveyard: GeoCities. Launched in 1994, GeoCities had a revolutionary idea: let anyone create their own web page for free. But it did more than that. It organized these pages into virtual cities and neighborhoods based on what they were about. Computer sites were in Silicon Valley, entertainment pages were in Hollywood, and so on. It was a simple but brilliant metaphor that made the abstract idea of cyberspace feel like a real browsable community. And it was a phenomenon. At its peak in 1999, GeoCities was the third most visited website on the entire planet. It hosted at least 38 million pages created by users, a digital metropolis built by ordinary people. It pioneered the idea of online neighborhoods that social media platforms would later build their empires on. So what went wrong? In 1999, at the height of the dot-com bubble, Yahoo bought GeoCities for an eye-watering $3.57 billion. But as the 2000s rolled on, the internet started to change. The rise of blogging and early social networks like MySpace and Facebook offered a newer, slicker way to exist online. These platforms were about you and your friends, not topic-based communities. Yahoo, which was struggling with its own identity crisis, decided GeoCities was obsolete. On October 26, 2009, Yahoo officially pulled the plug on the US service. With that one decision, millions of websites, personal stories, fan art, early records of online life were deleted. It was a cultural extinction event, and most of us didn't even realize it was happening until it was too late. The death of GeoCities was a corporate decision, but there were other, quieter assassins killing off huge chunks of the early internet. I'm talking about technology itself. And the biggest culprit was a piece of software that was once the beating heart of online creativity: Adobe Flash. From the late 90s all the way through the 2000s, Flash was everywhere. It was the engine that powered a revolution in interactive content. Countless browser games, viral animations, and the very first video streaming sites were all built on Flash. It was an accessible tool that let a whole generation of digital creators get their start. But Flash had its issues. It was full of security holes. It hogged your computer's resources, and critically, it wasn't built for the mobile age. The killing blow came in 2010. Steve Jobs famously criticized Flash for its poor performance and security risks, and refused to support it on the iPhone and iPad. As the entire world shifted to mobile, Flash's incompatibility became a fatal flaw. Newer open web standards like HTML5 could do everything Flash did, but they were safer, faster, and worked on any device. On December 31, 2020, Adobe officially ended support for Flash Player. Overnight, countless websites, games, and animations that defined an entire era of internet culture were rendered inert, unplayable, and inaccessible on modern browsers. The vibrant, moving parts of the early web were suddenly frozen in time. Beyond a single piece of tech, a bigger trend acted as the undertaker for the old web: corporate consolidation. The story is a familiar one. A huge corporation buys a smaller, popular service, and a few years later, when it doesn't fit the new strategy or make enough money, it gets shut down. We saw it with GeoCities. We also saw it with Yahoo Games. Launched in 1998, Yahoo Games was a beloved spot for casual games like chess, spades, and Bejeweled, and millions of people played there. But as part of Yahoo's massive restructuring in the 2010s, the games portal was seen as disposable. Citing changing technology, Yahoo started shutting the service down in 2014, with the final nail in the coffin in 2016. An entire community that had been around for nearly 2 decades just vanished. We saw a similar story with MapQuest. As the first big web mapping service launched in 1996, it completely changed how we got around. Before Google Maps, we were all printing out MapQuest directions. AOL bought it for $1.1 billion in 2000, and it was the undisputed king for a while. But it was slow to innovate compared to the much slicker Google Maps that launched in 2005. After getting passed between different corporate parents, it became a shadow of its former self. Still technically around, but left in the dust by a better, more integrated competitor. These are just the big examples. Countless other sites died quieter deaths. Maybe their owners just forgot to renew a domain name, or a server crashed without a backup. The result is a phenomenon known as link rot or content decay, a silent, creeping erasure where the internet slowly breaks down. A recent study from the Pew Research Center found that an astonishing 38% of all web pages that existed in 2013 were gone just a decade later. So, why does any of this matter? Who cares about a bunch of clunky old websites? It matters because when these sites disappear, we lose more than just blinking text and MIDI files. We lose history. The internet is our collective cultural memory, and its early days were this unique period of unfiltered human creativity. Losing it is like tearing out pages from our own diaries. For so many of us, these sites were our first blogs, our first fan pages, our first time talking to people from around the world. Those personal histories are just gone. When platforms like MySpace declined, a huge cultural touchstone for music disappeared with it, taking the first steps of countless bands with it. The loss severs the connection between today's digital world and the messy, experimental Wild West it grew out of. Luckily, not everything has vanished. In a rare and brilliant act of preservation, Warner Brothers has kept the original 1996 website for the movie Space Jam alive. It's a perfect, hilarious time capsule of 90s web design. But it's a rare exception. For every Space Jam website that gets preserved, there are millions of dead GeoCities pages. It's a stark reminder that even though we were told the internet is forever, that was a lie. But the story doesn't have to end in a graveyard. A dedicated group of digital archaeologists and archivists is fighting back against this cultural amnesia. The most important of these is the Internet Archive, a non-profit, and its incredible tool, the Wayback Machine. Launched in 2001, the Wayback Machine's mission is to provide universal access to all knowledge by saving copies of web pages. Its web crawlers scan the internet, taking snapshots of sites so you can go back in time and see what they looked like years ago. As of late 2024, it has archived over 916 billion web pages. It is an absolutely essential tool for exploring our lost digital heritage. But the archive isn't perfect. It can't save everything. Dynamic content, like a lot of flash animations or things that needed to talk to a server, is often broken or lost. And some websites can just block the crawlers, leaving huge holes in the archive. Beyond the Wayback Machine, there are also community efforts, like the groups of volunteers who scrambled to save as much as they could from GeoCities before the plug was pulled, creating archives like Reocities. These efforts are heroic, but they're fighting an overwhelming tide of data loss. These archives are the last remaining monuments to a lost world, and they're just sitting there, waiting for you to explore.